is going on, guys? Today, as you can tell by the title, I'll be going through the most underrated players of every MLB division. Now, how this will work is that I'll go through each division and I'll select one hitter and one pitcher who is the most underrated of the class. This way, I don't have to compare hitters and pitchers. I can just say who's the most underrated hitter of each division and who's the most underrated pitcher of each division. So it will add up to 12 players. Before we start, make sure to like, subscribe, and leave a comment down below. I want to hear some video suggestions, and do you agree with what I said in this video? Who do you think is overrated? Who do you think is underrated? I want to hear all of it. So without further ado, let's get right into it. Starting off in the AL East, the most underrated hitter is Rafael Devers. Now, a lot of people like to say that Xander Bogaerts is the best hitter on that team, which is a very fair statement, but then they don't even mention Rafael Devers' name, which is not fair at all. I mean, compare the stats. Rafael Devers hit .311 with 32 homers, adding up to a .916 OPS, while Bogaerts had very similar stats with a .309 average and 33 home runs. All the while, Bogaerts took 7 years to get those stats, while Devers is still 23. I mean, everyone's messed up on this guy. He was even 12th in the AL MVP voting, while Bogaerts was 5th, while they had pretty much the same offensive numbers. Some honorable mentions were Gleyber Torres, Austin Meadows, and Hanser Alberto, who's an Orioles second baseman who actually hit over 300 last year, although, after looking at all of this, Devers is the clear choice. On the mound for the AL East, the most underrated pitcher is Brandon Workman. Now, if you don't know who Brandon Workman is, he's a Red Sox reliever who took the spotlight for Boston last year. Last year, he had a 1.88 ERA and 104 strikeouts in 73 appearances. And he actually became his team's best reliever, which is hard to do in Boston considering they won a World Series just 2 years ago. Yes, he can use improvement in terms of whip, which is at 103, and he is already 31 years old, but with how good of a season he had and how little talk he gets, I think he's the clear choice over some honorable mentions like Charlie Morton, Tyler Glasnow, and even Ken Giles. Moving on to the AL Central, the most underrated hitter in this division is easily Whit Merrifield, and this is because he's actually been underrated for a couple of years now. In 2019, he hit .302 with 16 home runs and actually stole 20 bags, which is 20th in the MLB, although he still didn't get any MVP votes at all. And to put that in perspective, even Kevin Pillar got some. The downside is he only has an .811 OPS, but he's not the type of player to have a high slugging percentage anyway, so it doesn't mean that much. Some honorable mentions include Carlos Santana, Hunter Dozier, and Jorge Soler, although he's the top pick, not even close. On the pitching side of the AL Central, there wasn't very many options, but I came up with Jake Odorizzi of the Minnesota Twins. He's not your typical ace, but he's still a great pitcher that nobody mentions. After jumping around a lot of teams, 2019 was his best year by far, as he went 15-7 with a 3.51 ERA and 30 starts. I think he just doesn't get much attention because he's on a great Twins team, and he's often overshadowed by Jose Barrios, who is the #1 pitcher on that team. As I said, there wasn't very many options for the pitching side in this division, as my only honorable mentions were from my favorite team, the White Sox, Alex Colomé, and Aaron Bummer. Although I think everyone can tell, out of these three options, Jake Odorizzi is the most underrated. Moving on all the way to the AL West, I'm deciding to go with Yuli Gurriel of the Houston Astros. Now in 2019, when they supposedly weren't cheating, he hit .298 with 31 homers and an .884 OPS, which isn't bad, especially considering the fact that he's 35 years old. A lot of his attention goes away because he's overshadowed by other great Astros players, but that doesn't take away from the fact that he had a great 2019. Not many people know this, but he could actually be a solid infielder for any team, despite his age and despite the amount of talk that he gets. Some honorable mentions were Michael Brantley, his teammate, Mark Canha, and Danny Santana. On the pitching side of the AL West, this is an interesting one because if you know him, you know that he is a stud, but not many people know who he is. He only played in 6 games in 2019, but still put up a 1.50 ERA with a 0.67 whip, which is a great start for a 22-year-old rookie. His name is Jesus Luzardo, and last year he was a top prospect for the Oakland A's. He actually pitched in the wild card game and shut down the Rays. And for the future, he's expected to be the next star fireballer. He's actually almost similar to Aroldis Chapman, but his pitches also move more. Right now, this guy's really underrated simply for the fact that nobody really knows him, and he could win multiple Cy Youngs in the future. Some honorable mentions are Marco Gonzalez and Mike Minor, but this is nothing on the level of Jesus Luzardo. Now we're halfway done as we go back to the NL East, and the most underrated hitter here is Howie Kendrick. Despite being 36 years old, he had the best year of his career, as while he didn't have enough at-bats to get any awards, he had 344 with 17 homers and a 966 OPS. Not to mention, he also had a great postseason. I mean, he was one of the main reasons why the Nationals won the World Series. I'm not saying that he has much of a future left, but not many people mention how good of a 2019 season he had. I mean, if he kept up those numbers for a full season, then he would have won the batting title and would have hit almost 40 home runs. Some honorable mentions consist of Jorge Alfaro, J.D. Davis, and Scott Kingery, although, like I said, Howie Kendrick had a much better season, and also those guys get much more talk. Moving on to the pitching side of the NL East, the most underrated pitcher is Mike Soroka. He was one of the best rookie pitchers in 2019 and actually became the new ace of the Braves. He went 13-4 with a 2.68 ERA and 142 strikeouts in 174 innings. Yes, his whip could use improvement, but despite that, he had a huge season. In fact, his 13-4 record is very good considering his division offensively and defensively. Also, he was really the only choice here. The only honorable mention that I could really find was Sandy Alcantara, who got enough attention after he made the All-Star game. For the most underrated hitter in the NL Central, I had a solid group of Kyle Schwarber, Eugenio Suarez, Keston Hiura, and Brian Reynolds, but only one of them hit 49 home runs, and that was Eugenio Suarez. He will actually be a leader of the Reds offense going into 2020, which is saying something considering how many free agent signings the Reds made last offseason. Last season, Suarez hit .271 with 49 home runs, adding up to a .930 OPS. That is huge for somebody that barely got any MVP votes. In fact, his 49 homers was second in the MLB, leaving Kyle Schwarber, Keston Hiura, and Brian Reynolds for honorable mentions. This guy needs more attention, and I think as he progresses in the MLB, he'll get more. Along with Eugenio Suarez, the Reds have some other very underrated players like Sonny Gray, Luis Castillo, and Anthony Desclafani, but none of them can beat the king of underrated players, who is still being underrated after winning a World Series. This player is Kyle Hendricks, who was on the Cubs' 2016 World Series team. In fact, not many people remember this, but in 2016, the year that they won the World Series, he had the best ERA in the league. In 2019, he had a 3.46 ERA with 150 strikeouts. Like I said, he is a king of underrated players, as he hasn't even had an ERA of 4 or above in his entire career, which is saying something because, at least for me, 4 is about the midline for pitchers' ERAs. Jumping to our sixth and final division, the most underrated hitter in the NL West is Justin Turner. To me, it's pretty impressive how he hasn't dropped below a batting average of .275 since 2012. In 2019, he had a .290 average with 27 home runs, and that added up for an .881 OPS. Like Merrifield, Turner isn't really meant to have a high slugging percentage, but is still a really good player, and besides, his OPS was still .881, which is really good. Everyone already knows he is good, but to me, he is really underrated because he's a lot better than what a lot of people think. Some honorable mentions were Eduardo Escobar, Jock Peterson, and Hunter Pence, but he's the most underrated out of that group. For our final player of the video, I decided to go with John Gray of the Colorado Rockies as the most underrated pitcher in the NL West. He's not super great, but the Rockies know that they're getting a solid pitcher every year when he comes to the mound. In 2019, he had a 3.84 ERA, which put this into perspective. That is phenomenal as he plays in Coors Field and he puts up those kind of numbers. And look at Kyle Freeland. The Coors effect, it ruined him. On top of this, he averages a strikeout an inning. Like I said, he's a big piece for the Rockies because he's the only pitcher on that staff that the Rockies can rely on every single year to do really well. Besides this, he's really the only choice, as the only other pitcher that I could have chosen here is Zach Davies. Okay, so now that the list is over, a lot of you guys might be wondering, where is Anthony Rendon or Marcus Semien or Xander Bogaerts? But here's the thing though, those guys were underrated in the midst of the 2019 season. I was solely basing off this video of the guys that are underrated right now. Those three guys were underrated last season, but they're not really underrated anymore. So did you guys agree with my list? Please comment down below. And remember, please like and subscribe if you want to see baseball content like this all the time. And I will see you guys next video.